All right, welcome everybody. Thank y'all for joining us. We're going to give folks a few more minutes to join in. So just test out the chat box. Tell us what part of the state that y'all are in, where you're joining us from, and what your favorite kind of turtle is, or even which ones you've seen this spring. Yeah, and make sure you select your message to go to everyone in the chat box so everybody can see or your messages. Everybody can see your answers. And we'll give people a few more minutes to hop on here. But yeah, with the weather getting warmer, I've seen so many of our water turtles out basking. And I even saw an eastern rat snake the other day walking around Saluda Shoals. Um, it was a little cooler out, so he wasn't in a hurry to get anywhere. But it was pretty cool to see some snakes out this time of year too. Uh, all right, we have people coming from or joining from Columbia, Chapin, Edisto Island. That's where we love to go vacation. We were just there this past weekend. All right, and we're at 12 o'clock here. So we'll go ahead and get started. So welcome everybody to our Wild Webinar Wednesdays series. Thank y'all so much for joining us today. Just as a common courtesy, we'll be recording this webinar, so it will be available to watch on our YouTube channel. Your microphones and cameras will be off, but you're welcome to ask questions in the chat, and we will get to those after the webinar. We'll do a Q&A afterwards. So I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Savannah Jordan. I'm the Habitat Education Manager for the SC Wildlife Federation. We have a very special guest for our Wild Webinar Wednesday series today, Steve Bennett. He's a herpetologist, and he is retired from the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources after 32 years of service. He attended the University of Georgia, where he worked on his bachelor's and master's in zoology. And his research for the master's degree focused on amphibian and reptile ecology. And then he worked with the Savannah River Ecology Lab with Dr. Whit Gibbons, his major professor and his longtime friend and mentor. And then he took a job with the SC Wildlife and Marine Resources Department, which soon became what we know as the SC Department of Natural Resources now. So he was hired as the zoologist for the Heritage Trust program there, and he was given the task of collection and use of zoological data in the identification and protection of significant natural areas in South Carolina. He also worked with the non-game program on projects involving rare and declining amphibians and reptiles. And during his 32-year tenure with DNR, he gradually shifted his primary focus and first love and he shifted to his primary focus and became the herpetologist for the agency. And during the last 20 years of his career, he directed projects on some really cool species, the eastern diamondback rattlesnake, the gopher tortoise, and the gopher frog, the flatwood salamander, and other pond breeding amphibians, as well as general amphibian and reptile surveys on public land. And Steve was also the primary contact for anyone, especially in the Midlands, who needed information about amphibians and reptiles. And he retired in 2012, but he still gets out in the field to help his colleagues in ongoing amphibian and reptile conservation projects. And we're just so excited to have him here with us today to tell us all about turtles and the ones we have here in South Carolina. And like I said earlier, I'll be assisting with the logistics. And as I mentioned, you're muted and your cameras are off. So please, we'd love to have y'all use the chat box for all your questions and make sure they go to everyone. And we will get to your questions at the end. Once again, this webinar is being recorded and we'll upload it to our YouTube channel afterwards. So we invite y'all to sit back and enjoy this presentation. Thank you so much, Steve, for joining us, and I will let you take it away from here.
Thanks, Savannah, and thanks to everyone for joining me to talk about one of my favorite groups of animals, turtles. And what we're going to try to do today is talk about what a turtle is, the characteristics of turtles, where they live, what they eat, um, how do they make new turtles. We're going to focus on turtles in South Carolina and conservation status of some of them. And then we'll have some conclusions and questions later on. All right, Savannah, next slide. I think whenever one talks about or thinks about turtles, this is the first thing that comes to mind. You know, turtles, the only animals that carry their home around with them. Or do they? So we're going to answer that question today. Next slide. But first, we're going to really put turtles in context. Turtles are vertebrate animals. They have backbones. There are 5 classes of vertebrate animals: fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. Turtles comprise one of the 4 orders of reptiles in South Carolina. Testudines, which is turtles, squamatas, lizards and snakes, and then crocodilians. Okay, next slide. Reptiles evolved from amphibians about 320 million years ago. It's been a while. Some of the important traits of reptiles, all of them have some form of body armor, scales, scutes. Alligators even have a really cool thing where they have bone infused in with the scales called osteoderms. One of the most important things about reptiles is that they evolved eggs that are protected by a leathery calcified shell. And so what that really means is they don't have to go back to the water like amphibians, most amphibians. They don't have to go back to the water to lay their eggs. They can lay them in moist or places where they won't dry out. So it allowed them to basically exploit more upland terrestrial habitats. Reptiles have 3-chambered hearts, a little more efficient than 2-chambered hearts of amphibians. And this is the one that gets people kind of confused. They're ectotherms. We grew up knowing them as cold-blooded. Their blood's not cold. Their blood is actually the same temperature as the environment. But what that really means is that they don't generate enough internal heat to drive their metabolism. So they require basking in the sun or the heat of the environment to get warm enough to digest food. But the other side of that is they actually don't have to eat as much as warm-blooded animals. So that does provide them some interesting advantages. Next slide. And that brings us to turtles. Turtles are the most ancient reptile lineage, still with us. They appeared on the scene as shelled reptiles about 200 million years ago at the beginning of the Jurassic period. And I think we all know Jurassic Park. No human beings weren't walking around when tyrannosaurs were walking around, but you know, Jurassic Park, one of the big ages of dinosaurs. So here's some pictures of some fossil turtles, except the one on the far left is an early pre-turtle fossil. And please look at that and sort of get that picture burned into your mind. We're going to come back to it in a little bit. But these are, you know, turtles have been around for a long, long time. So what makes a turtle a turtle? Next slide. The obvious and most important answer is their shells. And there's a lot of animals that have shells: crabs, armadillos, clams, all, you know, sorts of invertebrates, but and some vertebrates like the armadillo. But no other animal shell is quite like a turtle shell. And we're going to save that as a special thing to talk about in a little bit. But I want to talk about some of the other traits of turtles. Unlike other reptiles, turtles don't have teeth. They have beaks like birds. And Savannah, if we can turn it so I can show them a turtle skull, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, go ahead, Steve. You can show them that shell on your
Okay,
screen.
this is the skull of a loggerhead sea turtle. These are very, very large turtles, obviously, but the skull of most turtles sort of pretty similar, and you can see they have a lower jaw, and then obviously the upper jaw is fused with the skull, but no teeth. And so, you know, they basically, it's a scissoring action that would tear and rip at whatever they're going to eat. So turtles do not have teeth. They don't have external ear openings. but they do have internal ear structures that are covered by a layer of skin. So, you know, that this little slide says that's a snapping turtle head, beak, avoid at all costs, because yes, anything that has a mouth can bite you, and a turtle bite, while they may not be able to rip your finger off, it can be a serious bite. So you don't want to get bitten by any turtle, but in particular, a snapping turtle. All right, next slide. Turtles are tetrapods. This is a fancy word that means they have 4 legs. Turns out all reptiles were tetrapods originally, but some, like snakes and some lizards, lost their legs. They're nopods. And then there's actually one weird worm lizard that has 2 front legs. So, but turtles are tetrapods, 4 legs, and their legs can tell you some things about where they live and what they do. Like on the left, the gopher tortoise, that their legs, the front legs, are evolved and designed for digging burrows. A lot of aquatic turtles, like the softshell turtle in the center, have webbed feet that they use for swimming. And then the most extreme adaptation is the sea turtles, whose front legs in particular have turned into flippers. So they can swim in the oceans and the bays and in coastal waters around islands. Next slide. So that brings us to the shell, the most important and defining feature of turtles. And they're really fascinating. Turtle shells consist of 2 parts, an upper shell, which is the carapace, and the bottom shell, which is the plastron. And each one of those shell parts consists of 2 parts, so it's 2 and 2. An inner shell, which is made up of bone, and an outer shell, which lies over the inner shell. And the most common outer shell covering would be scutes, which are made up of keratin. And they're really essentially the same thing as our fingernails. It's epidermal skin that has keratin in it that makes them hard, like our toenails and fingernails. The second and less common shell type consists of a layer of leathery skin that overlies the bony shell. And that's what you find on the soft shells and the leatherback sea turtle. So a turtle shell is not its house or its home. I mean, we can think of it like that, that's fine, but it's actually part of its body, and it cannot crawl out of it and leave it behind. Next slide. And in fact, if you hearken back to that picture of the fossil turtle that I said look at, what you would see is that the ribs of that guy are beginning to flatten out and spread. And over time, what happened for turtles was the ribs expanded and fused. So a turtle's inner bony shell is actually its ribs. And the undershell, the plastron, the bony part, is really somewhat analogous to our breastbone. So yes, these are ribs that have flattened out and fused over time and formed that lower body, that lower shell, the bony shell. And if you look at the picture to the right of it, you actually can see that, yes, these guys have a backbone. And the backbone is right there in the top shell. That's the carapace. And the ribs come out from it and fuse to form the bony shell. And there's the plastron next to it. Now, the cool thing about the way these things are structured is that the scutes overlay the bony shell, and they actually overlap. If you look at the graphic to the left, the seams occur between scutes, between the keratin. The brown is actually the sutures between the bones. And everywhere you have a seam, there's going to be, to either side of it, it's going to there's overlapping, the scute is overlapping the suture of the bone. So it's kind of like when they build a brick wall, they don't pile bricks on top of one another, they overlap them for strength. And that's what's happened with a turtle shell. And the other cool thing, which is kind of, you can use this at parties to impress people, turtles are the only animals whose pelvic and pectoral girdles, our pectoral girdles, our shoulders, our pelvic girdle, pelvis down the hips, their pelvic and pectoral girdles are fully contained within their rib cage. So yes, they are not separate and apart from their shell. They are their shell. And I want to show you a couple of shells right now. If I can, we'll get back to these. but this one in my right hand is a yellow belly turtle, yellow belly slider, and in my left hand is a Florida cooter. And you can see that if you look in there, you can actually see the spinal column up there and the bony shell, which is the ribs that have come out. All right, next slide. So run through a little bit. So all turtles are egg layers. Females dig nest holes on land. They lay their eggs in the holes, cover the holes, leave, and that's it. They don't display any parental care. They have no idea who their babies are or whatever. They just leave them and they go. It can take about 60 to 90 days, depending on the species, for the eggs to hatch, and a few more for the hatchling shells to straighten out, and for them to resorb any remaining yolk before they are ready to emerge. Some species of freshwater turtles, especially if that nest is laid later in the season, like sometime in June instead of like May, they may overwinter in their nest holes, because basically they're living off the yolk supply they have. And these are cold-blooded, quote unquote, cold-blooded ectotherms. They're not using a lot of energy. It's sort of a dormant period for them. So they can stay down in that nest hole and emerge in the spring when in fact there's just more resources, food resources available for them. So sometimes people will say, man, I found a baby turtle like the little yellow-bellied turtle over there on the bottom right, crawling across, the yard or whatever, going down to the lake, and it's April. And so, yeah, that happens. I mean, this is an animal that is overwintered in the nest hole. A lot of turtles don't have sex chromosomes like humans and mammals have X and Y chromosomes. Their temperature of the nest, or the temperature at which the egg is incubated, actually determines their sex, and it's fairly complicated, and it's being studied, not in greatly understood. The turtle on the left, on the little young softshell turtles have sex chromosomes. Yellow-bellied turtles don't. And the shell of a newly hatched turtle is very soft because the bones are not completely calcified. And they will harden as the turtle matures. But if you ever were to see a baby turtle that newly emerged from an egg, they kind of are bent over because they have to sort of conform to the shape of that egg. So as they sit in the nest hole waiting to emerge, that shell will straighten out a little bit. And then, of course, as they grow, the bone will start to harden and really provide them with some protection. But the shells of juvenile turtles, young turtles, generally not completely calcified, and makes them pretty vulnerable. Next slide. Which brings us to the fact that the highest mortality in all turtle species occurs when they are in the egg and in their first 2 to 3 years after they hatch. And the probability of any egg laid by a female living to reach that it will live to reach sexual maturity is very, very low. Turtles reach sexual maturity based on achieving a minimal body size, not age. And a number of species display sexual dimorphism. In some, the males grow larger than females. And in that case, it may be because there's some male-to-male interaction, competing for females. But in a number of species, including our water turtles, the females get much larger than the males, and they delay sexual maturity until they get to a larger size because they can carry more eggs. So it's really just math, not my favorite subject, but the more eggs you can carry, then the better chance of you having some offspring survive to sexual maturity to replace you. Next slide. Turtles eat a whole lot of different things. There are turtles that are strict herbivores. They eat, plants, weeds, whatever, anything, especially a lot of some of the aquatic species. And on land, like box turtles eat fruits and plants. There are some, like the snapping turtles and the softshell turtles, which are quote unquote carnivores. They eat fish, mollusks, crustaceans. But a lot of turtles are just scavengers and omnivores. They eat what they can find and what they can acquire, and that have a wide range of diet, and it might change through the year based on the availability of certain foods. And habitat. Turtles live all over the place in a wide range of habitats. I mean, sea turtles are in the world's oceans, barrier reefs, coastal marshes. The diamondback terrapin is our only estuarine turtle species, lives down on the coast in the saltwater marshes and creeks down there. We have a lot of turtles that live in freshwater wetlands, ranging from rivers, streams, to swamps, lakes, ponds, and freshwater marshes. And then we have some turtles like the box turtle and the gopher tortoise, which are completely terrestrial and live in upland habitats. Okay, next slide. So we're going to focus on South Carolina turtles. There are, and I'll say 15, 16, and that's because when I grew up, there were 15. When I grew up, there were 16. Now, two have been combined. We'll talk about that later. But basically, about 15, 16 species of turtles that occur in our state, excluding marine turtles. Now, we do have one turtle, the loggerhead, that does nest regularly on our beaches and will occur in coastal waters at certain times of the year. And every once in a while, a green turtle comes on shore and lays a nest. And every once in a while, a leatherback comes on shore and lays a nest. And Kemp's redleys, which is a rare marine turtle, will actually come in and spend time in our coastal marsh and creeks. But, you know, are they residents? I mean, we can call them that if you want, but they really are seagoing, oceanic, marine species. The diamondback terrapin is, like I said, our only estuarine species, lives in the salt marshes. If you go to the beach, especially during the summer, you may see now signs that say diamondback terrapin crossing, or they've protected nesting areas, because a lot of these guys got killed on the roads, and it would be females coming up to nest and crossing roads to get to a relatively sandy, somewhat dry area where they could lay their eggs. They live in the creeks and they eat a lot of snails and small crabs and invertebrates. Okay, next slide. The interesting pancake turtles, these turtles that have the leathery shell instead of a keratinized, scute, are soft shells. We have two species in South Carolina, one of which, the Florida soft shell, is not that common in our state. And you can see from the range map, it really just occurs in the very lower section of our state. And we don't know a lot about it. It's very, very common in Georgia and Florida. So it's not really a rare turtle. It's just one that doesn't occur widely in South Carolina. The other turtle, now this is a juvenile, and these guys, both species, get very, very large, sexually dimorphic, and I guess the females of both species, and I love to use, can get about as big as a wash tub. So they're flat, but they can be that big. And something about them that's really cool. Now, spiny soft shells occur throughout the state, and they're in rivers, and they'll be in lakes like Lake Murray, which is an impounded river. And they look like pancakes, both of them. And so, and their necks are incredibly long. And if you look at the tips of their nose, in both cases, they look sort of like snorkels. So these guys will bury it shallow in the sand and the muck, and they'll bury it at a depth where they can reach that neck up to the surface of the water and take a breath and lay there, and they'll be covered. And then that's how they ambush fish and other, like, crayfish and whatever that they're going to feed on. Next slide. This is the guy that the alligator turtle. Well, there is an alligator snapping turtle. It doesn't occur in South Carolina. It actually occurs in streams that drain into the Gulf of Mexico, Gulf drainage streams. But this is its cousin, the common snapping turtle, and it's a brute too. It's a very large turtle, and it comes by its name honestly, because if you find one, it will lunge out and try to snap at you. Very very defensive, doesn't want you to get near it. And it's an interesting, because I don't have to show you a picture of it, but that the carapace, as you can see, is very large, very hard. Early on, they have a lot of prominent sort of projections and all that make it look sort of almost like a dinosaur or something. They wear off as they get older. But if you flip this guy over on the plastron, it's almost non-existent. They have a very small, kind of soft plastron. And what that tells you about this guy is he spends most of his time down on the bottom of rivers, creeks, streams, and ponds. And of course, if he has to get out and crawl across the land, which they do from time to time, they've got that big bony shell on top to protect them. And if you get close to them, yes, they will snap at you. Next slide, please. We have some small turtles in South Carolina, and the musk turtle and the mud turtles. We have one species of musk turtle, common musk turtle, also call it the stink pot because it does have some musk glands and can smell bad. And then we have an eastern mud turtle and a striped mud turtle. And it's kind of difficult to tell those two apart because in South Carolina, most of the striped mud turtles don't have good stripes on their shell. Now, they may have stripes on their head if they stick it out and you can see them. They do get larger than eastern muds, and eastern muds generally occur in isolated freshwater wetlands, temporary ponds, and striped mud turtles generally occur in slow-moving streams in the coastal plain. So there's a little habitat separation, but it's difficult to tell them apart. But it's not difficult to tell musk turtles from either mud turtle because mud turtles have two shell hinges on their plastron, and they can actually sort of close their shell up to provide a little protection. Musk turtles, kind of like the snapping turtle, have very, very small, not much of a plastron at all. It tells you that they probably don't do a lot of moving overland, whereas the mud turtles do from time to time move overland. Musk turtles are generally always in the water and, on the bottom too. So they're not really exposing their undersides. Next slide. Yeah, so this is the most common species of turtle in South Carolina in the coastal plain. So Augusta to Columbia to probably Cheraw and southeast, the coastal plain of South Carolina, the yellow-bellied turtle, also known as yellow-bellied slider. And it's the one that you just see people will go to ponds and lakes and whatever in that part of the world, and they'll see a whole lot of turtles up on a log sunning, and many times it's this guy. And one of the things and there's some species I'll talk about in a minute that are similar, but one of the things about this guy is if you look especially on the picture on the right, the yellow-bellied turtles always have a yellow blotch behind their eye. Well, especially as they're young and getting older. Now, as they get older, that blotch will disappear or get darker. And with old adult males, even the markings on the shell will be gone. But young turtles have that bright yellow blotch on the side of the head, and they very, very common. They're omnivores. They'll eat anything. People, I'll get a lot of people. When I was working, people call me, so I've got an infestation of turtles in my pond and they're eating on my fish. Well, snapping turtles and soft-shell turtles, yes, they would eat some fish. These guys really don't catch and can't eat very successfully game fish, healthy fish. These guys are scavenging omnivores. And what they do is they help keep your pond clean. So you have sick, dying, diseased fish. They also eat a lot of vegetation and they eat a lot of bugs. And so they're really good for your ponds. And the analogy is when I would tell people, it's like you can see lots and lots of them on those logs in your pond, just like if you looked out on the plains of Africa, you might see lots and lots of wildebeest or lots and lots of gazelles, but you don't see a lot of lions. So the snapping turtles are kind of like the lions. These guys are like the wildebeest and gazelles. And you can have a lot of them. They're not going to bother the fish in your pond. In fact, they really do improve it by helping keep your pond clean. One issue we've had is that the cousin of these guys, the red-eared slider, which has a beautiful red blotch on its side of its head, was very popular in the pet trade. And, we've seen them. They used to sell them all the time, and people would buy them for their kids. And, unfortunately, the vast majority of them would die because the people wouldn't know how to take care of them. But the few that lived to be, 2 or 3 years old, if they lived to 2 to 3 years old, they were going to live forever, and they were going to outgrow the tank you had them in. And so people started releasing them. And so we have areas around the state where we have, especially close to urban areas where you have ponds and whatever that have really large populations of red-eared sliders. Now, they are subspecies. They will interbreed with the yellow belly like crazy. So, over time, I guess those genes will sort of breed out or become less. But we always ask people, if you've had one of these as a pet or get one, don't release it into the wild. Okay, next slide. And here's the what I said, 15 or 16. When I was growing up, we said the Florida cooter was one species and the river cooter was another. Now the guys who look at genetics tell us they're the same species genetically, but they're what we call ecotypes. So Florida cooters live in the coastal plain of South Carolina, and they live in a lot of the same habitats that yellow-bellied turtles live in, but they'll also be in, streams that might move a little faster than yellow bellies. They are strict vegetarians. And then river cooters actually live in the Piedmont, in the fast-flowing rivers of the Piedmont, and they live like in Lake Murray, which is a dammed up stream. So you'll see them, and they get very large. The females of these species get very, very big. The males don't, and they're both vegetarians. Cooter comes from an African word, kuta, which means turtle, and slider comes from the fact that these guys will sit on logs and bask, and if you get near them, they'll slide off into the water. Another relative of theirs, the chicken turtle, is a really kind of cool turtle, has an interesting shell shape, we call them the yellow pajamas, the big stripes on the front. And these guys live in isolated wetlands like Carolina bays and ponds like that fill and dry. And they are omnivores. They'll eat basically anything they can get their mouth around. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. And I'm going to talk about this, and I'm going to show you a couple of examples. So the shell shapes of some of these turtles can tell you something about their life history and what they do. The yellow-bellied turtle has a fairly high dome or arch, and you know from history and geometry that a high dome is a stronger structure. They live in the coastal plain. They're in ponds, temporary wetlands, slow-moving streams. They live with alligators. And because some of them live in ponds that dry or, out temporarily, they have to move over land from time to time to, find new places to live. And of course, that high dome, that strength, as they get older and really the shell hardens, it would take a very, very large, strong alligator to crack that shell. Very great structural integrity in that shell. Florida cooter, intermediate. They live a lot of same places with yellow-bellied turtles. They don't move overland as much as yellow-bellied turtles because they don't tend to live in some of the temporary water situations, but they do live places that alligators are. So they have sort of a higher dome. And then if you look at the river cooter, I mean, in some ways you can look at them from a profile. They're almost like the soft-shell turtles. They're not quite a pancake, but they're very streamlined, and they live in fast-flowing Piedmont rivers. And so basically their shells are designed for fluid hydrodynamics, get around in those fast waters. And one place, you can sort of see this if you go in Columbia, there's a place called Saluda River Walk. You can walk along the Saluda River, and there are a lot of turtles there. And if you look out into the rocks in the middle of the river, almost always basking on the rocks are river cooters. If you look to the edge of the thing where it's very slow and up there, that's where the yellow bellies turn out. Now I want to show you the real shells once again. So this is a yellow-bellied turtle, and you can see how highly domed, and you can imagine it would take a lot of pressure to crush that guy. And this is a big female. And this is a Florida cooter, not quite as flat as a river cooter. This is a male. It's a smaller. Males are much smaller than the females. A female might be this big, but a little more streamlined than the yellow-bellied turtle, but still a strong enough shell. All right, next slide. So there's some smaller aquatic turtles in South Carolina that are worth mentioning. One, the spotted turtle, conservation candidate. It is uh, occurs in isolated ponds, small streams, swamps, braided systems, and a beautiful, beautiful turtle, and unfortunately was highly sought after for the pet trade. So we've had to protect this turtle because of that, because they were so popular in the pet trade. And its kissing cousin down below it, the bog turtle, there's only been 6 or so records from South Carolina, all up from sort of between Highway 11 and the mountains. They occur in the upper Piedmont and some of the beaver ponds and seasonally flooded bogs that occur next to some of the streams. And once again, they're endangered across their entire range. And one of the reasons, not only habitat loss affects a lot of these animals, but this guy was targeted for the pet trade. So spotted turtle and bog turtle have suffered because of people taking them for pets. The painted turtle is a relatively common species in South Carolina. Now, it's an aquatic animal that it sort of takes the place of the yellow-bellied turtle, although it's not as big. Once you move into the Piedmont and upstate, painted turtles are completely aquatic, and they live in a lot of the same habitat types as yellow-bellied turtles, but up in the Piedmont, not in the coastal plain so much. And then, of course, one of the favorites for everybody is the eastern box turtle. Now, box turtles are terrestrial. They live on land. You'll find them in a puddle of water or find them in the edge of a stream, and they like to go in and take a drink every once in a while. And they are more closely related to our aquatic turtles, but they are really completely terrestrial. And I'm gonna hold this up. This is actually one that I've had for a while. So a mummified box. So you can see they have a pretty high domed shell, and because they are terrestrial, and as an adult, it would be hard for something to crush that shell. Like I imagine one time there were wolves, and now there's coyotes and dogs and other things, but killing a box turtle to eat it would not be an easy thing for most animals to do. And unfortunately, this is an animal that has suffered from the pet trade too. They're very sought after for pets in other parts of the world, Europe and in Asia, and so we've had to protect them also. Next slide.
Hey, Steve, can you show us that box turtle again?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yes.
show it, put it a little bit higher. Yeah.
Okay,
There
yeah,
you
because I can't
Yeah.
really. Yeah, okay, there you go.
Awesome.
Yeah, and
Thank
you can
you.
see the dome. And the other thing about the box turtle, I'm glad you did that because I can mention, like the mud turtle, in a way, but even better, the other thing about the box turtle, it's called a box turtle because it has one hinge across the plastron right there, and they can actually close themselves up completely in their shell, pull in their head, their legs, their tail, and close that shell down tight, and you can't get it open when they do that. So that's really why they're called a box turtle, because they can turn themselves into a box. All right, next slide. Now, as we come sort of winding up here, talk about my favorite. I guess yeah, it's my favorite one because I've enjoyed working with this guy when I was with DNR, and that's the gopher tortoise. It is a state endangered species. There's a petition to list it throughout its range as federally endangered. Whether that will happen or not, I don't know. But it is an animal that has suffered greatly by habitat loss and by people used to take them for food. And so now we are working to try to conserve and augment the populations of gopher tortoises in South Carolina and throughout its range. There are 4 species of tortoises that occur in the United States. The desert tortoise, that occur in North America. The desert tortoise, Berlandier's tortoise, which is in Texas, and then there's a weird, an interesting one called the Bolson tortoise, which is in a very small area of Mexico, and then the gopher tortoise. And the gopher tortoise occurs on sand dunes that are there because of rivers that tossed up sand, a lot of these fluvial sand ridges, or sand that got there somehow, but deep sands that they can burrow into. And the thing about the gopher tortoise is that it digs a burrow. You can see the schematic of it over on the right, and that burrow can be almost, I mean, depending on the size of the tortoise and how long they've been working on it, I mean, it can be up to 30 feet long and up to 20 feet below the surface of the sand. And if you can imagine that where these guys live is in this dry, sandy, we call it xeric habitat. If you live in that habitat along with the gopher tortoise, and you can get underground into nice, cool, moist sand, or during the winter, you can get underground into somewhat warmer habitat, you're going to do it. And as it turns out, there's been over 250 species of vertebrates and invertebrates that have been documented to use gopher tortoise burrows as sites of refugia. So sometimes they'll use them while the gopher tortoise is in there, and sometimes they'll go in and use abandoned burrows. And there's not one gopher tortoise, one burrow. These things will dig multiple burrows in their lifetime, and they'll steal burrows from other tortoises in their colony. So it's sort of like the burrow is a community resource, and it's not just for the gopher tortoise, but for all these critters that live there. And because of that, we consider the gopher tortoise to be a keystone species, and that's a designation that means if you remove the gopher tortoise from that habitat, the habitat itself would start to change drastically. All those animals that rely on the gopher tortoise burrow as a refugial site, they'd be out of luck. They would have no place to go. And as you can see from the map, we probably once had gopher tortoises spread throughout that southern portion of South Carolina, but right now most of them are in Jasper County, some a little bit in Hampton County, and then there's one colony in Aiken County, which when I was working with DNR, we acquired, and we started working to actually we had some gopher tortoises there, but we're trying to augment the population and bring it back up to a sustainable level. So gopher tortoise, state endangered species, and this is a gopher tortoise shell, which I will hold up high and you can see, and these guys are big. That's a fully grown male, and the reason I can tell it's a male is by this thing, and the males actually will do some sort of ritual combat over females, and they'll butt each other, and that's called a gular projection. And but they also, as you can see, highly domed, and the very, very strong shell. Once they get to an adult size, nothing's really going to bother them. But there's another really cool thing. If you look to the diagram of the burrow, and this is the trick question, the entrance to the burrow of a gopher tortoise burrow is a really good predictor of what dimension of a tortoise. And I'm gonna answer it for you, because a lot of times I let people guess, because it's got to be this width, and the answer is no. It's actually the length, because to dig that burrow, it doesn't come back up. You notice it ends, and that tortoise has to be able to turn around everywhere within that burrow. So that burrow entrance, it's a perfect predictor of the length of the tortoise that dug it. And in many cases we've seen while working on these guys, they will come up to that burrow mouth and they will turn and block the burrow so that another marauding gopher tortoise can't steal their burrow. All right, next slide. We talked about some of the issues with pet trade, and habitat is something we could do an entire habitat loss alteration, entire show on itself. But the other thing is that we found out years ago that our turtles were being trapped by people in the United States who were taking them and actually shipping them to Asia, where they were eaten. And this was happening at very, very large levels, unsustainable levels. And one of the things, harken back to my piece about the females and how big they get, because they need to lay so many eggs because of the survivorship. Of course, if you're going to want something for the food trade, you want the biggest turtle possible. So basically, female turtles, they would take anything, but female turtles were being pulled out at a really, really unsustainable, completely unsustainable rate. So we have, it is against the law now for anyone to sell, barter, any of the native species. There's a list under that code of laws that you can find, so that nobody can trap them and sell them to go to Asia to be eaten. Now, you can still have some pet turtles. In fact, we wanted to provide for that. You can have 5 individuals of a selected species, not to be more than 10 turtles altogether. But if you have ever kept pet turtles, 10 turtles is about all that you really need to take care of, because they can be they take a lot of work sometimes. Now, the gopher tortoise, bog turtle, spotted turtle, and all of the sea turtles are on the lists of endangered and threatened species, and any possession of them is prohibited. Next slide. So I'm going to conclude right here by saying, thank you for being here. Thanks for taking an interest in turtles. And remember, turtles we herpetologists study amphibians and reptiles, and turtles are part of that. And there's a lot of information out there, a lot of great books, some written by, people from here in the state. There's a lot of information online. And so please, if this is something you're interested in, avail yourself of some of these books. Get online and start looking. And let me just say that there's also a lot of misinformation, myths, out and out falsehoods being, they get spread about all kinds of animals, but reptiles in particular. And so if you really want the truth, get into the literature, get into the people who know what they're talking about. And I think Savannah's going to wrap it up, but I'm going to stick around and answer questions that any of y'all have. So please feel free. And I think she'll tell you how to do it.
Yes, thank you so much, Steve. That was amazing, and that was so much great information. And those books are really awesome. Those are some great resources as well. And so now we'll open it up for questions, and we'll start with the first question that we have. Let's see. What is the difference in turtles and tortoises? That's a good one.
Yeah, that's a great one, because there really is no difference. Every tortoise is a turtle. Not every turtle is a tortoise. So if you go back and look at the taxonomy of it, we talked about the fact that turtles are in this order Testudines, and then King Philip called only 4. So there are families of turtles that occur in that order. One of the families is the tortoises. One of the families is the water turtles, the Mytidae. So basically, it's just a taxonomic thing. But all tortoises are turtles. Not all turtles are tortoises.
Yeah, and that's kind of a tongue tie
It
too.
is a tongue tie. I'm gonna have a drink of water while we answer the next
Yeah,
one.
I'll look for the next question. Let's see. Someone asked, will the video be available? Yes, it's recorded, so we're gonna send it to y'all too if you got on late. So we'll get it sent out to y'all. But the next question is, are there turtle farms for human consumption, and where do turtle soup come from?
Well, Skip, my buddy Skip Harden asked that. And there are turtle farms. There have been turtle farms in Louisiana, was big for that. But now some of the turtle farms are in Asia. Since we've shut down the trade, in a lot of places in the world have, in China and Southeast Asia, there are places over there that are growing their own turtles. So there are places like that, and the turtle soup issue. I mean, some states still have, it's still legal to, like snapping turtles were a big one, and they still have basically treated as a game species, and they have seasons and limits. So there may be, depending on the state you live in, a way to do that. But there's no real, in the United States, most of what's farmed are turned out as babies. So, if you want turtle soup, you're probably going to go have to catch your snapping turtle or whatever, and check the laws to make sure you're doing it legally.
Yeah, and I've heard that they taste good. I don't know. Have you ever had turtle soup?
I can't bring myself to do it,
Yeah, yeah.
it's just one of those things. They're, I feel like they're my animals. So, I'm not opposed to people, do it. It's fine if you want to try that. And there's a sustainable way to do it. I just haven't been able to do it.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Okay, our next question is a really good one. So if we were to find baby snapping turtles on the sidewalk, not near a water source, should we move them to somewhere near the marsh or should we leave them alone?
Well, at that point, the way I would approach this is I should point out that female turtles, when they go to lay, construct nests and lay their eggs, they're often some distance away from water, because if they lay their eggs too close to water, the nest might flood. And if the nest flood, the eggs are going to drown. I mean, if you cover eggs with water, they're going to drown. So you'll often find these juveniles quite some distance from water, and they have their ways. I mean, they smell water, they sense, whatever, they can find their way back to the water. Now, to me, it would depend on the setting I found them in. If it was a place where there were lots of cats and dogs mainly, people who might do some, I would probably tend to, locate the nearest body of water, and it shouldn't be too far, and take them down to the edge of that and let them go.
Yeah, yeah, that was going to be one of my questions. What do we do if we find any turtle in the road?
Well, here's the rule. If you find a turtle crossing the road, a lot of people, oh, I was crossing a road in a dangerous area, so I picked it up and drove it miles away and let it go in the, protected area. Don't do that. These animals know where they are when they're out in their environment. They know, they have cues. Most of them are chemical cues, smells, whatever. And if you take them too far away, you're disorienting them. And, they may try to find their way back, which will put their lives in greater danger. The best thing to do is, if you find a turtle crossing a road, is be careful with a snapping turtle. You might want to just, if you have a broom or a shovel, just kind of push it to the side of the road. But others, you pick it up and you see which way it was going, and you take it to the side of the road it was heading for, because they know where they are, they know where they want to go, and you can save its life, keep getting run over that way. But if you take it too far away, you may actually be putting its life at risk.
Yeah, yeah. And are there any, repercussions to relocating turtles in other areas? Like, are there any diseases that could spread?
Yes, yes. And in fact, one of the things that happened early on with the desert tortoise was that people were taking them as pets. And they would bring them in. And if you don't know what you're doing, it's very easy to keep a tortoise for some time while it declines. And reptiles are very good about masking symptoms of whatever they've got. And there was an upper respiratory virus that spread through desert tortoise populations, that was introduced by people who'd had a desert tortoise for a pet for a while, had not taken great care of it, not appropriate nutrition, whatever they did, they just didn't take care of it. Its immune system declined. The bugs took over, the respiratory virus bugs. And their response was, oh, we better take it back out to the native population and put it there. Well, of course, what they're doing is vectoring that respiratory virus out to the native population. And we had populations of desert tortoise crashing because of people putting infected turtles back in them. So yes, moving these things around it can be tough. Now, we're doing it with gopher tortoises down in Aiken, but we have a very strict protocol. Well, and when I was there, but they're still doing it, we have a very strict protocol for health screening and swabbing the nasal passages to see. But also, if you take a gopher tortoise, I think this would be true with a lot of turtles, but gopher tortoises in particular, because they are tied to that sandy habitat with their burrows and that home they live in. If you pick up a gopher tortoise, and this is one of the things that was happening earlier, especially in Florida with development, people will say, well, we've got a development, we're going to take all the gopher tortoises and we're going to pick them up, we're going to put them over on this sand hill 20 miles away. Well, as soon as they put them down, they hit the road running, trying to get back to where they were from. And so, it's there's been a protocol worked out for putting up holding pens, and some of the work we did with gopher tortoises and the telemetry we did down in Tillman area on the native population went to inform this project. But you put up these holding pens, and you put in right habitat, and you have a big pen and a few tortoises, and you put them in there, and you maybe dig starter burrows for them, and you leave them there for 8 months, 9 months or so. If you pull up that pen, their movement patterns are not different from gopher tortoises in native habitat. So what they want to do, you want to keep them there. They get to know everybody. They get to know where they are. All of us, after a period of time, they're home. So you can move some of these things around. Translocation is what it's called, but you really have to be careful about how you do it.
Yeah, thank you. That was great. And another question that we have, which you kind of touched on, about moving turtles. Is it dangerous to touch a wild turtle's shell? Jill says she'll rescue them from the road, when she lived in Florida, but she was told not to touch them.
I will tell you that I don't think in most cases you're going to vector anything. I don't know of any diseases that jump from human beings to reptiles. Now, there was an issue with small turtles and salmonella, still is. So if you want to do that, I mean, the best thing to do is to do it, and then if you have a wet wipe or something, clean your hands. Yeah, I mean, I think you have to get something, moist and sticky and gooey from that turtle to get salmonella. But, just to be cautious, if you have, wash your hands pretty quickly, whatever, have a wet wipe, do that. But I don't think it's not a threat to the tortoises or turtles. And it's probably a minimal threat to you.
Yeah, and especially the snapping turtles. That's probably the main one we don't want to.
That's a different kind of threat. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Just let them do their thing.
That's right.
Okay, and let's see our next one. What makes a turtle? Oh, I guess this kind of goes back to our first question. What makes a turtle not a tortoise?
Yeah. Well, I mean, once again, it comes down to this whole thing of taxonomy of what makes a yellow-bellied turtle not a Florida cooter, or what makes a box turtle not a soft-shell turtle. So the people who study these things look at characteristics. We call it morphology, the way they shape, the way they look, and all like that. But for tortoises, once again, the vast majority of tortoises in the world well, I'd say all the tortoises in the world are really terrestrial. Now, some do live in swampy, wet areas, but they're not aquatic. And so, their whole evolution of their shells and their legs and their diet is geared towards living in a terrestrial habitat versus animals that live in aquatic habitats. So we could look at the shape of the legs, the big, high, strong dome of the shell, the fact where they live, if they're living on land and not going into water. Although when we were working with them, we have found gopher tortoises in temporary ponds just floating around, having a good time, going for a swim. That's, it's probably unusual, but I think they're like anyone. It's hot out there, they're going to take advantage of something, but they don't live in the water.
Yeah, and I've heard that tortoises walk more like on their toes. Is that true?
Well, if you look at the structure of the feet is very different, and in fact, scientific name of the gopher tortoise is Gopherus polyphemus, and polyphemus is a reference to elephants and elephant-like legs. So,
Yes.
so yeah, I mean, I guess you could think about in some ways, but it's not really walking on their toes, but they just have a very different structure.
Yeah, yeah. Looking at their feet, they do look like elephant feet for sure.
Yes. Mhm.
Our next one from Charles is, what ecological services do turtles provide? It's a good one.
Yeah, it is, and I would say that I would I would I would have a caveat here that was one of the things that was a pet peeve of mine during my career is we always look for, when you say what good is it, it would really mean what good is it to me or human beings. And, that sort of belies the fact that these guys have a right to exist and live absent anything they do for us. But most critters actually do provide some ecological services free of charge to us. And I would say for a lot of the turtles, especially the aquatic ones, is they help keep ponds and wetlands and freshwater streams and rivers in balance because they are scavengers. If some of these guys like yellow-bellied turtles, in particular, they really can't catch and eat healthy live game fish. But if they find one that's dying or is dead, they'll eat it in a heartbeat. So in terms of basically providing a basic ecosystem service where they help clean up the habitat, it's kind of like vultures.
Yeah. Um, and Catherine asks, this is a good question about habitat loss. If there's any solutions as far as counteracting effects from growing industries and urbanization in South Carolina.
Yeah,
She's really interested in that.
yeah, and that's the $64,000 question. The My way of thinking is the best thing we can do now is to identify the last remaining tracts of appropriate habitat. And then for the gopher tortoise, that's critically important because when you think about where they live in the southeast, in some ways it's not this simple, but it's kind of like a matrix of, well, it's wet, and then you go up on the hill and it's dry. Well, where do you think people build? Well, they build up where it's dry on the hill. So if you go to Florida, where's the development occurring? Well, it's not in the swamps and the wetlands. It's up on the sandy ridges and sandy hills where gopher tortoises live. So, we're always going to be fighting that battle. But the one thing we can do is through programs like our South Carolina Heritage Trust program, which is part of DNR, and other organizations, is identify, the best remaining habitats that are out there and work either through acquisition and management or through management agreements with private corporations or easements or something that we can do to ensure that tract of land stays relatively intact for as long as we can.
Yeah, yes. And Terry, she asked, could we please have a webinar like this on South Carolina amphibians? So
I,
stay tuned. Maybe we could do one in the future.
I think that's easily possible.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, does anybody else have any other questions to pop in the chat for Steve before we wrap up here? Here's one. Let's see. Okay. How susceptible, Catherine asked, how susceptible are turtles to increase in pollution and stormwater runoff? It's a good one.
They are susceptible. They're probably not as susceptible as say fish and amphibians, but certainly there have been areas where, depending on the severity of the pollution, that you can begin to see diseases and certain conditions creep into, especially aquatic, turtle populations. And one of the things people kind of don't think about, I think, is that think about direct effects. Well, what is it doing directly to the turtles? And it probably, I think it's having some direct effects, indirect effects. How is it affecting the food supply for those turtles? Yes, basically anything we do to their habitat can have some sort of effect on the turtles as individuals and their populations.
Yeah, yeah, and this kind of goes into our next question from Dee Dee. She says, we're losing our ephemeral wetlands through development, deregulation, and other things. Um, how does this affect turtles? I'm sure it affects their nesting habitat, right?
Well, there's some species, I tried to mention them as we went through, chicken turtle, mud turtle, spotted turtle, I'll go through and I'll remember that I forgot some that are tied to those ephemeral wetlands. I mean, yellow-bellied turtles will use them, but they'll be in other places too. But for spotted turtles, chicken turtles, um, eastern mud turtles in particular, that's where they live. So when that is gone, they have no place to live. So,
Right, right.
protecting them, and it is a tough one because in doing this work, I worked early on with Carolina Bays, and you can walk into some of these places at certain times of year, and you'd be hard pressed if you don't know what you're doing to convince someone that it is a wetland because it can be dry, and it can be dry for a year or more. But what's important is that they're ephemeral, they fill and dry, and when they do, that's when that habitat becomes available to these species.
Yeah, yeah, and Charles mentioned in the chat that box turtles are great seed dispersers too. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. They eat a lot of fruits, and in fact, I know people that have observed that, like if they have some sort of a fruit tree that like a persimmon tree, or that they've seen areas where there's something that's dropping off, that they'll often find a congregation of box turtles, and they actually kind of know when the fruits are falling and on the ground and eating them, and then they eat them, and then they take off and they poo somewhere, and the seeds come out, and there you have some new plants.
Yeah, yeah, that's so cool. Um, and this might be our last question before we wrap up. Catherine asks, are there any programs that track turtles, like how we have birds banded, fish tagged, and all that?
There are, and in South Carolina, we did some radio telemetry with gopher tortoises, and the certainly the people working with marine turtles, sea turtles, have done telemetry to follow them to learn more about them. So it really is a sort of depends on species by species and what the needs are. And I think the guys at Savannah River Ecology Lab and probably DNR, there's probably still a little bit of work going on gopher tortoises, and I know in Florida that there is. So yes, there are throughout probably the Southeast people that are doing that, and it's really on a case by case basis as needed.
Yeah, yeah. It's so cool to be able to see, where they're going and, the different habitats that they prefer. Especially with birds. They have a really cool tracking program with birds. So,
That's right.
turtles, it's even cooler. Um, but I think that's all our questions. So thank you so much, Steve, for teaching us all about the amazing turtles we have in South Carolina. It was such great information, and we're just so grateful for you sharing your knowledge and your expertise. And to all you guys listening in, if y'all have any other questions, feel free to reach out to us. On the screen, you can see our email address. And we'd also love to know how we did. So that QR code there will take you back to our feedback form that just lets us know how we did, how you liked this webinar. And we hope you all enjoyed it and learned something. I surely learned a lot. My husband is really into turtles, and he's like a walking dictionary of turtles, but I still learned something. So thank you so much, Steve. And so SCWF is so proud to bring these webinars like this to the public on various topics. Maybe we'll do one on amphibians soon. And a lot of these webinars, all of them are on our YouTube channel, and this one will be uploaded to our YouTube channel as well, so you guys can watch it or you can share it with your friends. And if you did enjoy this webinar, we'd love to hear from you, and also would greatly appreciate any financial support. So please consider making a one-time or monthly donation to SCWF so we can continue offering these free webinars. And we'll send out a follow-up email to everybody, how to connect with us, and a link to this webinar as well. So thank you all so much for attending as part of our Wild Webinar Wednesday series. in April, and we hope to see you guys on our next one. It's going to be next Wednesday at noon, where we'll have a guest speaker presenting about threatened and endangered species in South Carolina. So we hope to see y'all there. Thank you so much, Steve. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you, Savannah, and thanks everybody.